The rain arrived without warning, turning the glass walls of Valen Cross's corner office into streaming mirrors. He'd been reviewing contracts for 3 hours, red pen moving with mechanical precision. Missed details cost more than money they cost control. Valen was 42, dark hair showing silver at the temples, athletic build maintained through discipline. His eyes carried the wariness of someone who'd learned young that survival required constant vigilance. The building was nearly empty. 10 floors below, Friday night energy pulsed through the streets. Valen preferred the quiet that came after, when the city's mask slipped and showed its real architecture. The elevator chimed. His security monitor showed an empty hallway someone had gotten off on the wrong floor. Then she appeared in his doorway. A child, no more than 6, stood at the threshold with rain-darkened hair and a yellow raincoat 3 sizes too large. Her sneakers squelched against marble, leaving wet prints that would evaporate by morning. Valen's pen stopped. Children didn't materialize in executive offices on Friday nights, 40 stories above street level, in buildings designed to keep the uninvited out. She walked past the empty reception desk and crossed the workspace beyond. The child moved with practiced navigation, someone who'd learned to make herself small, to occupy minimal space. He set down his pen. The soft click seemed unnaturally loud. Outside, rain hammered the windows. Thunder rolled over the sound. Up close, he saw the hollows beneath her eyes, chronic sleep deprivation. The way her fingers twisted her coat hem, the practiced blankness that came from rehearsing neutrality until it became armor. Too thin. Not natural wiriness, but the sharpness from meals skipped. Her shirt, faded from washing, showed cartoon characters he didn't recognize. "Security will be here in 90 seconds, Valen said, voice neutral. He hadn't pressed any alarm, but she didn't know that. She didn't move. Her dark eyes held his with directness that adults learn to avoid in his presence. This child either didn't know the rules or had decided they no longer applied. "How did you get past security?" "I told them my mom works on the 8th floor," she said steadily. "Said she forgot her phone. The man at the desk called up, but nobody answered. He let me take the elevator. Sophisticated. She'd identified the protocol's weakness, a guard's humanity. Provided plausible details. Understood that calling a vacant office would produce no contradiction. That explains the lobby. Not this floor. The elevator requires authorization above 30. Satisfaction flickered across her face. I got off on 30 and took the stairs. The door said emergency exit only, but it didn't have an alarm. She'd tested it first. Calculated the risk. Proceeded. This child thought like someone 3 times her age. "What's your name?" "Mira." "Well, Mira, you've gone to considerable effort to reach my office. Why?" She pulled out a small notebook and placed it on his desk, rotating it so he could read the childish handwriting. Valen Crosscrest Tower, 40th floor. Makes bad people. Stop being bad. Ask on Friday, after 6 p.m. Below was a crude map showing the security desk and elevator path. She'd researched him, planned this, waited for the optimal moment. "Who told you about me?" "Nobody. The library has computers. I searched for Seattle. Powerful man who fixes problems. Your name came up in articles. Rain intensified. Lightning flashed, turning the office stark white. In that illumination, Valen saw desperate calculation, someone who'd run out of conventional options. She closed the notebook, hands trembling. Not from cold, but from full-body tension that came from doing something terrifying because all alternatives were worse. She looked directly at him, and in her eyes, Valen saw a question forming, bending her shoulders forward. Then, barely above a whisper, "Can you make the nightmares stop?" The question hung between them. Valen's expression didn't change, but something behind his neutrality shifted a hairline fracture in foundation. Children asked for things. They didn't ask like this. Mira stood perfectly still, yellow raincoat dripping. She wasn't crying or pleading, just waiting with the patience of someone who'd learned desperation displayed openly got dismissed as manipulation. "Nightmares," Valen repeated neutrally. He needed elaboration, literal night terrors, or metaphorical horror too terrible to name directly. "Every night. I can't make them stop by myself. I tried. I tried meant this wasn't first resort. Other options had been attempted and exhausted. Nightmares are thoughts, he said precisely. I solve problems in the physical world. Contracts, disputes, people. I can't rearrange thoughts. They're not just thoughts. Urgency broke through her control. They're real. They come into my room. They have a face and voice. And hands. She stopped, fists clenching. You said you make bad people stop. The nightmares are a person. A real person who comes every night. Understanding arrived with inevitability, bringing cold, clarifying rage from recognizing a particular species of evil. Not nightmares, not metaphor. Someone worse. Tell me about the nightmares, every detail. She took a breath that made her whole body rise and fall, then began. His name is Garrett, my mom's boyfriend. He moved in 4 months ago. Mom said temporary, but he's still there. She pulled out a chair and sat without invitation, feet dangling. During the day, he's quiet. Watches TV, plays phone games, doesn't talk much. Mom says he's looking for work, but I've never seen applications. Her fingers found the notebook again, nervous talisman. But at night, after Mom takes medication and goes to sleep, she works night shifts at the hospital, double shifts sometimes, that's when he changes. Lightning flashed, thunder followed, immediately. Mira flinched but continued. He comes to my room around 10, sometimes earlier if he's drinking. I hear him in the hallway first. Heavy footsteps. The wood creaks. 7 steps from living room to my door. Then he stops. Just stands there. Sometimes a minute, sometimes 5. She stared beyond the windows. Then the door opens. Slow, he turns the handle so it doesn't click. He thinks I'm asleep because I pretend. I lie still, breathe slow. I learned by watching Mom, but I'm never asleep. I just wait. Valen's hands curled into fists. What does he do? Watches me. Sits in the chair by my bookshelf. Sits there in the dark and watches me pretend to sleep. Rain hammered harder, providing white noise. 2 people in lamplight while the storm tried to wash the city clean. Sometimes he whispers. Says things like, "You're growing up," or, "You look like your mom at this age." Once he said I was beautiful, made my skin feel wrong, like I wanted to take it off and hide somewhere. He couldn't see. Clinical detachment. Children who could narrate trauma with this distance had lived with it long enough for dissociation to become survival. Last week, he touched my hair. Just once while I pretended to sleep. It took everything not to scream or move, because I think, she looked at him with terrible knowledge, I think it's worse if he knows I'm awake. Right now, he's convincing himself this is okay because I'm sleeping. But if he knew, he'd have to decide whether to stop or... She didn't finish. Does your mother know? I tried telling her. She said I must be having bad dreams, that Garrett helps with rent, that I should be grateful. Mira's hands twisted together. She works so hard. She's so tired. I don't think she has energy left to hear bad things. How did you find me? I told my school counselor. She called someone who came to our apartment. They talked to Mom and she said everything was fine, that I have anxiety. The officer gave me his card, but nothing happened they could see. Nothing they could prove. He doesn't hit me. Not yet. He just watches and waits and I can feel him planning something worse. Yet hung in the air with prophetic weight. So I researched people who fix problems when police don't work. People like you. Thunder rolled, and silence felt charged with terrible possibility. Valen's office fell into weighted silence. Outside, the storm continued. But inside, time stopped between Mira's final word and what came next. He should call Child Protective Services. Protocol demanded it. But Valen had been in emergency foster placement. 3 homes before his 10th birthday, each a variation on benign neglect or active hostility. The system worked on paper. In practice, it was a conveyor belt moving damaged kids between warehouses. And Mira was right, she hadn't been hit. Nothing had happened yet, meeting legal threshold for emergency removal. A man watching a child sleep. Inappropriate compliments, touching hair, once warning signs, predatory grooming, escalating patterns professionals recognized as dangerous, but not actionable. Not yet. By the time they became actionable, too late. Different city, different apartment, different monster wearing different face. His mother had worked nights too. Packaging plant, double shifts. She'd leave at 5. That's when Marcus would arrive. Not the boyfriend. Marcus was her younger brother, Valen's uncle. Going through a rough patch, code for unemployed, alcoholic, couch surfing. He'd watched the kid as favor. Marcus hadn't watched him properly. Valen had been 7 when it started. Old enough to know something was wrong, young enough to lack language for it. Marcus would sit on his bed in darkness, smelling like cigarettes and cheap vodka, whisper things about growing up, about secrets men kept. The touching started gradually, hand on shoulder lingering, fingers through hair, arm around waist pulling close enough to smell alcohol, feel breath, heat. Valen had done exactly what Mira was doing. Frozen, pretended sleep, convinced himself staying still and silent was safer. He'd tried telling his mother once. Same exhausted deflection. Uncle Marcus is helping us. Don't be difficult. So Valen stopped trying. Learned to wait for nights to end, count hours until his mother returned. Learned survival sometimes meant enduring the unendurable because no one was coming. Until Marcus decided watching and touching weren't enough. Until escalation reached inevitable conclusion and Valen understood silence. Hadn't made him safer, just given the monster time to get bolder. That night, Valen stopped being victim and became something else. Something understanding violence could be a tool, power the only reliable protection. He'd been 11. Mira was 6. She'd come before reaching that point. Before nightmares transformed from psychological torture to physical assault. Recognized escalation. Sought intervention while time remained to prevent rather than avenge. Smarter than he'd been. Braver. More strategic. Valen looked at the child in his chair, rainwater dripping, and saw himself decades earlier, small, scared, absolutely alone. "I can make the nightmares stop," he said quietly. Words like vows, contracts signed in something more binding than ink. "But you need to understand what that means. What I am. What helping requires." Hope flickered in her dark eyes, fragile but refusing to extinguish. "I make bad people stop," Valen continued, voice dropping into the register, making grown men nervous. "Not through counseling or conversation. I make them stop by removing their ability to continue, by making consequences so severe they choose to disappear. Understand?" Mira nodded slowly. "You're like people in movies Mom doesn't let me watch. The ones who fix things by scaring bad people until they go away." "Close enough. Yes, which means if I help you, you can never tell anyone how it happened. Not your mother, friends, teachers, counselors, police. Because what I do exists where laws don't reach, where traditional justice fails and people like me provide alternatives. Can you keep that secret?" "I've been keeping secrets about nights for 4 months," Mira said, weight of accumulated silence in every syllable. "I can keep one more if it means he goes away." Thunder crashed overhead, shaking windows. Lights flickered but held. Valen pulled out his phone. "Tell me your full name, your mother's name, address, Garrett's last name, where he works, his patterns, habits, weaknesses. Then you leave here, go home, act like tonight never happened. Can you do that?" "Yes." No hesitation. She provided information in clear sentences. Valen typed with case-building focus. "Mira Chen, mother. Dr. Yuna Chen, emergency room physician at Harborview Medical Center. Address in the International District, aging walk-up, rent barely manageable. Garrett Sovich, no employment, construction injury settlement drunk through." When finished, Valen stood. "I'm having my driver take you home. He'll drop you a block away. You'll walk back like you've been at a friend's house or library. Convincing? I'm good at pretending things are normal." They rode the elevator in silence. In the lobby, security guard Patterson looked up with measured neutrality. "Miss Chen found her mother's office closed," Valen said smoothly. "I'm having Laurent drive her home. Authorization code 77 Alpha. Patterson nodded, made brief notation, returned to monitors. The garage was cool, smelling of concrete and motor oil. Laurent stood beside the black Mercedes, straightening to professional readiness. "Take Miss Chen home," Valen instructed, providing address. "Drop her 1 block north. Wait until she enters safely." Before climbing in, Mira turned. In fluorescent lighting, She looked even smaller, yellow raincoat overwhelming her frame, but her eyes held steady. When will the nightmares stop? Valen crouched to her, level gesture making Laurent's eyebrows rise. Days, maybe a week, but they will stop. You have my word. Why are you helping me? Because someone should have helped me, Valen said, truth escaping. Because you were brave enough to ask. Because letting you walk back without doing anything would make me complicit in whatever happens next. And I've been many things, Mira, but I'm trying not to be that. She nodded as if moral complexity made sense. Perhaps it did. Children living with monsters learned early the world rarely divided cleanly into good and evil. Thank you, she whispered, then climbed in. Valen watched Laurent drive away, taillights disappearing into rain-soaked night. Thunder rumbled east toward mountains. He opened a new contact entry, Mira Chen, nightmares, then returned to his office, where 40 stories suddenly felt insufficient, where contracts waited but had become irrelevant compared to promises made to children who'd infiltrated his fortress and asked him to be something better. Rain continued falling, washing the city in silver sheets, and Valen began calling people who specialized in problems unsolvable through legal channels. 3 hours later, by midnight, Valen had compiled Garrett Sovich's profile predictable deterioration, man who'd squandered opportunities, blamed circumstances for character failures, took what he could from vulnerable people. His investigator Thea, 15 years FBI before private sector, delivered the initial report within 2 hours. She worked fast for priority alpha situations. Garrett Sovich, 34. Born Tacoma. Raised by grandmother after mother's overdose at 12. Father unknown. High school minimal achievement. Construction jobs for a decade. Injury 3 years ago, scaffolding fall. Herniated disc. $60,000 settlement. Burned through money in 18 months. Gambling, mostly sports betting. Online poker. Casino slots. When money ran out, drinking problem emerged, making him unemployable. Then he'd started cycling through girlfriends who could support them both. Pattern consistent. Meet healthcare or service workers with nurturing instincts and insufficient boundaries. Move in quickly. Contribute minimal rent and promise to recover. Gradually increase drinking. Become volatile. Eventually leave or get asked out. Yuna Chen was his 4th in 3 years. Met at hospital pain medication refills. She'd been attending physician. Something about his sob story triggered her desire to help. Dating 6 months before he moved in, claiming temporary arrangement after eviction. There's more. Thea's voice came through speaker. Arrest records. Nothing stuck, but pattern. 2 complaints from previous girlfriends. Harassment, trespassing. Both dismissed when women declined pressing charges. Sealed juvenile record suggests sexual misconduct with minor when he was 17. Neighbor's daughter, 12. Family paid restitution. He got probation. Valen's jaw tightened. Juvenile record meant current behavior wasn't opportunistic. Pattern, preference, predatory inclination. Always there, waiting for opportunity. Current routine, predictable. Watched apartment this morning. Garrett left 11. Convenience store 3 blocks away. Cigarettes and vodka returned. Didn't leave until Dr. Chen came home around 7. Dinner at Thai place she paid. Back by 8:30. She left for night shift, 9:45. He waited 10 minutes. Lights went off. And Mira's room? Light stayed on until 10:15, then off. Timeline matches what the child told you. Mom leaves, he waits, and pattern begins. Valen saw Mira lying in darkness, breathing slow, pretending sleep while counting footsteps. 7 steps. Pause. Door opening. I need options. Ways to remove him that won't blow back on Dr. Chen or traumatize the child. Legal first, then alternatives. Legal's tricky. He's established residency. Dr. Chen would need formal eviction 30 days. Minimum. Requires paperwork he'd be notified about. Given his pattern, notification triggers escalation. He'd know removal was coming, have month of access while processing. So legal's too slow and dangerous. Correct. Alternative approaches. Phone records show contact with brother in Spokane. Runs auto shop. Legitimate. They've texted about Garrett working there, but Garrett makes excuses. He doesn't want to leave his current situation. Exactly. So we make staying more dangerous than leaving, or leaving more attractive. Ideally both. Valen stood, looking over Seattle's night skyline. Somewhere in those buildings, a 6-year-old lay awake counting ceiling cracks. I want comprehensive surveillance. Video and audio inside apartment if possible, external if not. Document what's happening. Establish pattern. Evidence for leverage. Getting cameras inside will be tricky. Need several hours when both are gone. Find a window. Create one if necessary. Priority Alpha plus Bill. Whatever necessary. But get me eyes inside within 48 hours. Understood. Background on the brother. Married? Kids? Financial situation? Reputation? Weaknesses? If we're using him as extraction point, I need to know if offering Garrett a job works or if brother refuses. I'll have that by morning. Timeline, days. Garrett's been escalating 4 months. Touching started last week. We're approaching critical threshold. I won't let this child become another statistic because we moved slowly. Understood. Full operational plan by Monday. Valen ended the call. Days felt too long when every night meant another visit, another session of predator planning in darkness, but rushing created mistakes. If Garrett got spooked, he'd either accelerate or vanish, resurface in another vulnerable life. This had to be surgical, precise, complete. Laurent texted, package delivered safely. All clear. Valen should go home. But something kept him staring at Thea's report glowing on screen. Garrett Sovich, 34, predator wearing mundane face, hiding in plain sight. And a 6-year-old who'd recognized danger, calculated odds, decided infiltrating corporate buildings to ask dangerous men for help was her best option. Valen began documenting everything Mira told him. Even if never reaching courtrooms, documentation mattered. Evidence mattered. Ability to prove later his actions were justified, intervention necessary. What he was about to do was the only viable option. Outside, Seattle slept. Or pretended. Like Mira, lying still, counting breaths while monsters prowled. But monsters could be dealt with. Valen had built an empire understanding that truth, power, properly applied, could remove obstacles conventional morality and legal structures couldn't touch. A child in a yellow raincoat asked him to make nightmares stop. He was keeping that promise, whatever it took. By Tuesday afternoon, Thea accomplished the impossible. Comprehensive surveillance, audio recordings, of nighttime visits, leverage sufficient for permanent removal without violence. Cameras installed micro-units in smoke detectors and outlets during 4-hour window, when both were elsewhere captured 3 nights of exactly what Mira described. Garrett entering around 10, sitting by bookshelf, watching 20 to 45 minutes far longer than Mira estimated, fear compressing time, whispering things making Valen's hands curl. But Sunday night's audio provided real ammunition. Garrett on phone after Una left, drunk enough for carelessness, talking to former coworker, bragging, describing the kid in terms leaving zero ambiguity about intentions, explaining how he was taking his time, building trust, before making his move, laughing about mother being too exhausted to notice. Legally inadmissible, no warrant, no consent. But Valen didn't need it for court. He needed it for leverage. Here's what we have, Thea said, spreading documents. Brother in Spokane is Curtis. Sovich, 41, married with 2 kids, runs moderately successful auto body shop. Been asking Garrett to work for him over a year, but Garrett declines because he has a good situation in Seattle. Does Curtis know what that good situation involves? Absolutely not. Curtis is decent coaches kids soccer, volunteers at youth center, very involved in church. Wife's a social worker. If Curtis knew what Garrett's doing, he'd cut contact immediately. Which is exactly what we're going to make him believe is about to happen unless he helps us. You're going to threaten Curtis with exposure unless he cooperates. Not threaten, inform. Tell Curtis the truth. Provide evidence he can't dismiss. Offer choice. Help extract Garrett permanently, or we go public with everything, destroying any possibility of Curtis maintaining respectable reputation, while having predator brother everyone knows he refused to stop. Elegant. Brutal but elegant. Curtis would face moral crisis. Protect brother's secrets or protect future victims. Given his values, choice was obvious. How ensure Garrett stays in Spokane? 2 things. First, make very clear if he returns to Seattle. Audio recording goes directly to Seattle PD with video evidence. Won't hold in court but absolutely justifies immediate investigation. Restraining order. Likely arrest. Stay in Spokane or face charges. And second, give Curtis job offer with conditions 6-month minimum commitment, housing provided. But if he violates terms or returns during that period, forfeits signing bonus significant enough to make leaving financially painful. Curtis enforces terms because reputation depends on it. Garrett complies because alternative is prison. Valen walked to window, looking over the city. Somewhere a child tried focusing on arithmetic while functioning on 3 hours sleep. Timeline? Contact Curtis today with evidence. 24 hours to process and decide 95% certain what the decision will be. Assuming cooperation, Curtis calls Garrett tomorrow with offer. We've prepared contract, housing, everything. Looks legitimate. Garrett will be suspicious, but we've made it come through, brother. From family, bypassing most paranoia. What if he refuses? Option 2 is less pleasant but achieves same outcome. But I don't think he'll refuse. Job pays $50,000 with benefits more than he's made in 3 years. Housing free. Curtis will sell it as family, helping family. Last chance. Emotional manipulation that works on guys like Garrett who believe the world owes them. What does Mira's mother know? Nothing. As far as Dr. Chen's concerned, boyfriend got sudden job offer from brother. She'll probably be relieved, exhausted, barely keeping things together financially. On some level, she has to know Garrett's dead weight. And Mira? Comes home from school one day to find Garrett gone. Simple. Nightmares stop because monster disappeared. Thea gathered documents. Not as satisfying as breaking kneecaps, but sustainable. Gone, monitored, and if he tries returning or contacting them, we have evidence ready to deploy. Not justice traditionally. Garrett wouldn't face trial, wouldn't be registered as sex offender. Simply relocated and contained, access limited by geography and brother's supervision, but it was protection. Immediate, effective, invisible to Mira and her mother. No trauma of police interviews, medical examinations, court testimonies forcing 6-year-old to relive nightmares for strangers. Just simple relief of waking to lasting silence. Do it, Valen said. Contact Curtis today. Garrett on bus to Spokane by Friday latest. Thea paused at door. 15 years doing this work. Never seen you move this fast. Whatever this child said must have hit different. She asked me to make nightmares stop. That's all. She just asked. And I remembered what it felt like when I asked and nobody listened. After she left, Valen sat alone, watching the clock count minutes. Somewhere in the International District, Mira was in classroom, maybe staring out windows, counting hours until going home to pretend sleep. Not much longer. By Friday, Monster would be gone, and a child in yellow raincoat would discover that sometimes, when brave enough to ask the right person, nightmares really do stop. Mira came home Thursday to find the apartment different. Lighter somehow, pressure suddenly released. Her mother was making actual dinner and humming. Where's Garrett? Spokane. His brother offered him a job at the auto shop. Good money, benefits, housing. He left this morning. Pause. I think it's good for him. Fresh start. Mira stood frozen, backpack hanging from one shoulder. Is he coming back? Maybe to visit eventually, but committed to 6 months minimum. By then, shrug encompassing complicated adult relationship reality. We'll see. But for now it's just us again. Just us again. Words settled like warm, blanket safe, and almost impossible to believe. She wanted to ask questions but feared breaking the spell. Instead, she went to her room and closed the door. Everything looked the same. Narrow bed, faded comforter, bookshelf, small desk, window overlooking alley. But the chair where Garrett sat in darkness 4 months suddenly looked different. Harmless. Just furniture. Mira walked to it and sat, feet barely reaching floor. From this angle, she could see her bed, pillow where she'd pressed her face, exact spot where she'd lie rigid and terrified counting minutes. She wouldn't have to do that anymore. Realization hit with physical force, making her chest tight and eyes burn. Wouldn't have to pretend sleep, wouldn't count footsteps, wouldn't lie still while someone watched and whispered things making her skin feel wrong. Nightmares were over. A man in expensive office 40 stories above had listened to desperate request and somehow, impossibly, made it real. She didn't know how. Didn't matter. What mattered was asking for help and receiving it. That night, first time in 4 months, Mira went to bed at actual bedtime instead of hours earlier for sleeping performance. Her mother came to tuck her in something too exhausted to do when Garrett was around and kissed her forehead. Sweet dreams, baby. You too, Mom. After her mother left, Mira lay in darkness listening to apartment's normal sounds. Refrigerator humming, neighbor's television, rain against window. Normal sounds, safe sounds. No footsteps approaching. No handle turning. No presence materializing. She waited anyway, old habits dying hard. Counted to 100, breathing slow. When she reached 100 and door remained closed, counted again. And again. Around fourth count, past 300 total, Mira's breathing shifted from controlled performance to genuine sleep. Her body, no longer flooded with adrenaline, finally remembered what rest felt like. She dreamed of yellow raincoats that could fly in office buildings tall enough to touch clouds and a man with sad eyes who'd seen someone worth saving. When morning came, real morning with sunlight instead of exhausted survival, Mira woke for first time in 4 months feeling rested. The nightmares had stopped. Over following weeks, small miracles began appearing in Yuna Chen's life. First came grant notification from Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation Scholarship for Children of Healthcare Workers. Mira awarded full coverage for after-school art classes, plus supply stipend. She called to verify authenticity. Foundation confirmed everything. Yes, program existed. Yes, Mira selected. No catch. Your daughter's school counselor nominated her. We prioritize children showing resilience during difficult circumstances. 2 weeks later, her 13-year-old Honda received anonymous repair. She'd parked before double shift. Returning 16 hours later, found business card under wiper. Your vehicle was making unsafe sounds. As part of our community outreach program, we've performed complimentary maintenance and safety inspection. All repairs documented in envelope on dashboard. Pacific Coast Auto Care envelope contained itemized list totaling over $900. Brake pads, timing belt, oil change, tire rotation, diagnostic scan. Everything needed, but she'd been deferring. She drove to the address next day to verify. Shop was legitimate, professional. Manager confirmed, yes, they'd done work. No, she owed nothing. Yes, really, their community program partnering with healthcare workers. Then came apartment building announcement. Local philanthropist purchased property. Implemented rent stabilization. Current tenants' rent frozen 2 years. Increases after capped at 3% annually. All units receiving safety upgrades. New locks. Improved lighting. Security cameras. Yuna had been preparing for rent increase. Calculating which expenses to cut. Freeze alone saved $1,200 next year. But what affected her most profoundly, Mira's transformation. Her daughter, withdrawn and exhausted for months, suddenly came alive. Smiled easily, laughed at jokes, and invited friends over. Something stopped entirely when Garrett lived there. Dark circles faded. Teacher noted, remarkable improvement in focus and participation. At night, Mira slept through until morning instead of waking repeatedly. Stopped asking whether Garrett was returning. Stopped glancing nervously at doors. And stopped exhibiting hypervigilance. Yuna noticed but hadn't understood until it disappeared. One evening, making dinner together, Mira said casually, "I'm glad it's just us now, Mom." Yuna really looked, saw something making her chest tight. Relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief. Not sadness about Garrett's departure. Just simple happiness he was gone. "Me too, baby." Pulled Mira into longer hug. "Me too." That night, after Mira went to bed, Yuna sat with wine trying to make sense. Garrett's sudden departure. Cascade of good fortune following. Obstacles dissolving as if never existed. She searched for information about community programs, philanthropists buying buildings, scholarship funds. Everything checked out. Organizations existed. Programs were real. Documentation legitimate. But the timing, perfect, impossible timing of everything happening right after Garrett left, right when needed most, right when Mira finally healing. Coincidence strained credibility. She thought about the week before Garrett left, when Mira came home soaking wet despite rain having stopped, yellow raincoat dripping. She'd asked where Mira had been. The library. Doing research. Research for what? A project. About asking for help when you need it. Una stared at search results for Seattle philanthropists. Slowly, deliberately, typed different search. Valen Cross, Seattle. Results made her breath catch. Real estate developer, corporate acquisitions, charitable foundation work, and, beneath official biography, in comments sections and whispered internet corners, hints of something else. Something living in space between legal business and problem-solving that didn't ask permission from conventional systems. Una looked down hallway toward Mira's room, where her daughter slept peacefully for first time in months, then closed phone and finished wine. Some questions better left unasked. Some gifts better accepted with grace than interrogated with suspicion. Her daughter was safe. They were stable. Nightmares had stopped. That was enough. The letter arrived in December, hand-delivered to nurse's station. Her name in precise handwriting on expensive-feeling envelope. Inside, single card with embossed address. Crest Tower, 40th floor. Below, date and time. December 18th, 7 p.m. No explanation. No signature. Just invitation rendered as fact. She looked up address. Crest Tower, downtown, where office space cost more per month than her annual salary. 40th floor. She searched Valen Cross. His office was 40th floor of Crest Tower. December 18th arrived with clear skies and unusual cold. Una left Mira with regular babysitter and took bus downtown. Crest Tower lobby was intimidating. Marble floors, expensive art, and security desk with former military-looking staff. She gave her name, was waved through, and directed to private elevator requiring keycard the guard provided. Ride to 40th floor felt simultaneously too fast and impossibly long. Valen Cross was waiting. Expensive suit, dark hair with early gray, eyes assessing her with intensity she used evaluating trauma patients. Dr. Chen, thank you for coming. You didn't really give me choice, Una said, surprising herself with directness, fear and gratitude wrestling in her chest. Anonymous invitation to meet man whose name keeps appearing in strange coincidences. Respect flickered across his expression. Would you have come if I'd asked instead of summoned? I don't know. Probably. Not. Which I suppose is why you summoned. He gestured toward his office. This conversation deserves privacy. His office was understated, functional rather than ostentatious, though every element screamed quality. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Your daughter came to see me, Valen said without preamble. October 23rd, Friday evening. She infiltrated this building, bypassed security, walked into my office with a request. Una's heart dropped. Mira came here? Alone? She was very brave, and very desperate. Asked if I could make nightmares. Stop. Took several minutes to understand she wasn't speaking metaphorically. Understanding crashed over Una in waves. Research project. Wet raincoat. Library excuse. Mira had traveled downtown in rain, asked a stranger, specifically this stranger, for help. Garrett. Una whispered. Yes. She never told me. I asked so many times if everything was okay. She always said yes. Children protect their parents, especially when telling truth will hurt the person they're trying to protect. She knew you needed Garrett's rent contribution, knew you were exhausted, calculated telling you would create problems you couldn't afford, so found alternative solution. Tears slid down Una's face. What did he do to her? Nothing irreversible. Yet, he watched her. Came to her room after you left for night shifts. Sat in dark and watched her pretend to sleep. Touched her hair once. Whispered things making her feel unsafe in her own home. Something cold lived behind Valen's eyes. She came before escalation reached physical assault, but trajectory was clear. Predators don't de-escalate voluntarily. And you made him leave? I arranged circumstances making leaving more attractive than staying. His brother's job offer was real but also engineered. Timing, terms, pressure, all orchestrated to remove him quickly and permanently. Una wiped eyes with shaking hands. The other things. Scholarship, car repairs, rent, freeze, that was you too. Some directly, some through organizations I fund for exactly these purposes. Supporting people harmed by those the system can't or won't stop effectively. Why? You don't know us. Why go this far for someone you'd never met? Valen was silent, eyes distant. When he spoke, voice carried memory's weight. Because someone should have helped me. Because when I was young and something similar was happening, I asked for help and no one listened. Because your daughter looked at me and asked simple question, can you make nightmares stop, and I realized I'd spent 20 years building power specifically for moments like that. What good is any of it if I can't answer when a child asks for protection? Una processed layers of pain and redemption wrapped around simple intervention. What happens now? Do I owe you? No debt, no obligation, no expectation of repayment or loyalty or silence about anything you don't choose to keep private. What happened? Happened. Because it needed to. You and Mira move forward. That's the entire transaction. I don't know how to thank you. Then don't. He stood, signaling meeting's end. Just make sure Mira knows she did right thing asking for help. That being brave enough to admit you can't solve something alone isn't weakness, it's wisdom. She saved herself by being strategic enough to find someone who could intervene. That's extraordinary. At elevator, Una turned back. He won't come back? You're sure? He knows what happens if he tries. He's not brave enough to find out if I was bluffing. Pause. I wasn't. When she got home, Mira was asleep on couch. Una paid babysitter, waited until alone before gently waking her daughter. I met him tonight. The man you asked for help. Mira's eyes went wide, then wary. Are you mad? No, baby. I'm grateful and proud. So incredibly proud you were smart enough and brave enough to save us both. Mira's face crumpled and she threw herself into her mother's arms, crying in ways she hadn't allowed in months. Una held her daughter, let her release months of accumulated fear, rocking slowly while city lights twinkled outside. The nightmares really stopped. He promised they would, and they did. I know, baby. I know. That night, they slept in same bed, holding each other like storm survivors finally reaching shore. Spring arrived gradually. Cherry blossoms appeared in arboretum. Days stretched longer. And Mira Chen turned 7 with birthday party attended by actual friends impossible when fear lived in her home. Valen attended briefly, arriving with wrapped present, leaving before cake was cut. Other parents noted the well-dressed man who clearly didn't belong to their demographic but treated children with careful respect. Una introduced him simply as family friend, both insufficient and exactly accurate. The present was leather-bound journal with Mira's name embossed in gold. Inside, first page contained note in precise handwriting. 4. Writing down the things that matter. Not the nightmares, those are gone, but the dreams. Those are worth remembering. V. Over following months, Valen appeared periodically, never intrusively but consistently enough to become familiar. Coffee with Una on rare days off, conversations ranging from superficial pleasantries to deeper discussions about survival and second chances. Occasional dinners where Mira talked enthusiastically about art classes or books, and Valen listened with attention, understanding that being heard was its own rescue. He never asked for anything, never suggested help came with strings, simply existed as presence in their orbit, protective without controlling, interested without invasive. One June evening, walking waterfront while Mira collected shells, Valen said quietly, I don't know how to do this normally. Do what? Be someone people care about without it being transactional. Without power dynamics or obligation or understanding that I'm useful rather than wanted. Eyes on water, sunset painting everything gold. I've built my entire adult life around being the person others need when situations become impossible. I don't know how to just be someone you might want around when nothing's wrong. Una stopped walking, waited until he looked at her. You think we only value you because you fixed our problem? I think gratitude is a powerful emotion that can be confused with other things. You're right. I was grateful. I am grateful. You saved my daughter from something I didn't even know she needed saving from. But gratitude is what I felt in October. What I feel now is different. She paused, choosing words carefully. I like who you are with Mira. I like how you listen like her thoughts matter. I like that you're teaching her asking for help is strength, not weakness. I like that you've never once tried to take Garrett's place or position yourself as anything other than someone who cares what happens to us. And the parts of me that aren't that person, the parts that solve problems through intimidation and leverage and methods you probably don't want details about, are part of the whole package. I'm not naive enough to think you're simple or that caring about you won't come with complications. But I'm also not naive enough to believe good people only exist in simple forms. You use the power you have to protect my child. That tells me everything I need to know about who you choose to be when it matters. Valen was quiet, watching Mira crouch near water's edge, examining something in sand. She saved me too, you know. That night in my office. I'd forgotten why I built what I built. Forgotten power could be used for something other than accumulation and control. She reminded me. Then maybe we saved each other. All three of us. Sunset painted sky in impossible colors, and nearby Mira laughed at something she'd discovered, and Valen Cross, who'd spent 20 years being dangerous, allowed himself to believe maybe he could also be something else. Something like safe harbor for people who needed one. Autumn returned to Seattle with familiar gray skies and steady rain. Valen stood at his office window on Friday evening, watching rain stream down glass in rivulets, catching city lights. A year had passed since a child in yellow raincoat appeared in his doorway and asked impossible question. 365 days watching Mira transform from frightened girl into someone who smiled easily and dreamed big. Watching Una release exhaustion she'd carried like armor. Discovering distance he'd maintained wasn't protection, it was prison. His phone buzzed with text from Una. Mira wants to know if you're coming to her art show next week. She has a piece she specifically wants you to see. He typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." The art show was a modest evening event where parents crowded gymnasium admiring children's creative efforts. Valen arrived in casual clothes, trying to blend though. Blending had never been his particular skill. Mira found him immediately, grabbing his hand, pulling toward wall where her work displayed. "There. That one's for you." The painting was watercolor, vibrant despite medium softness. Showed city at night, tall buildings rendered in dark blues and purples, windows glowing yellow and orange like captured stars. Rain fell in silver streaks. In foreground, barely visible unless looking closely, was small figure in yellow raincoat looking up at tallest building. "It's called asking for help," Mira said proudly. "My teacher said I should explain what it means, but I told her some things people have to figure out themselves." Valen crouched to her level, studying painting with same attention he brought to million-dollar contracts. "It's perfect. Can I buy it from you?" "You can't buy it," Mira said, rolling eyes with 7-year-old exasperation. "It's a gift. You don't buy gifts. That's not how it works." "Right. Of course." He smiled, expression coming easier now than a year ago. "Then I accept your gift, and I'll hang it in my office where I can see it every day." "Good." Satisfied nod, then ran off to show her mother something else. Later that night, back in office with Mira's painting already hanging on wall opposite his desk, Valen thought about man he'd been a year ago. Powerful, isolated, convinced control was only reliable safety. Building empire after empire but living in none. Touching nothing, being touched by nothing. Then a child asked him to make nightmares stop, and in stopping hers, discovered his own had been running in background for decades. Nightmare of believing he was only valuable for what he could do, never for who he was. Mira had paid him 3/4 that night, then took them back when he refused. But she'd given him something far more valuable. Proof that strength could be used for protection instead of domination, that power could build instead of destroy, that parts of himself he'd learned to weaponize could also be tools for salvation. He'd told Una once that Mira had saved him. More accurate, she'd freed him from prison of his own construction, from belief his past determined his future, from nightmare of isolation he'd been living while telling himself it was security. Rain continued falling outside window, washing city clean the way it did every autumn, every winter, every spring, constant, relentless, Neither good nor bad, but simply what Seattle was. Valen picked up phone, looked at text thread with Una, at easy back and forth of two people building something sustainable from wreckage of separate traumas. Then looked at painting on wall, small figure in yellow, asking tall building for help and receiving it. Sometimes, he thought, bravest thing anyone could do was admit they couldn't survive alone. That strength wasn't refusing help, but knowing when to ask for it. That monsters could be stopped, nightmares could end, and people could change if given sufficient reason and opportunity. Mira had been brave enough to ask. He'd been broken enough to hear. And somehow, impossibly, they'd saved each other. The nightmares had stopped for both of them. Outside, rain fell on city full of people carrying their own monsters, their own desperate questions, their own yellow raincoats worn against storms, seeming too big to survive. Valen Cross sat in office 40 stories above street and made decision. One child saved was good, but what if there could be more? He opened laptop and began drafting plans for something new. Foundation, organization, systematic way to answer when desperate people asked impossible questions. Not everyone. He couldn't save everyone. But he could save some. That would be enough. That would be everything.